Good afternoon, everyone. Please have a seat. Now we will be starting very soon. Actually, I think we can start. First of all, thank you so much for everyone for coming, especially looking at the 4 simultaneous sessions coming in. I think we are one of the winners. but very thank you, and I promise that it won't disappoint you. It'll be a very exciting and also inspiring session. We have a very good line of speakers, panelists, eminent delegates in the room. So we have a very packed schedule today. We are trying to hear as much as possible from our partners. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Eduardo Banzon. He is the Director of Health from the Asian Development Bank. So I'll give the stage to you, Dr. Banzon. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I sort of missed the time because I was listening to the biosimilars discussion in the other room, and I always find biosimilars to be an exciting one that hopefully the advance will also support eventually. But nonetheless, let me welcome you to this side event. Of course, thanks to the Korean government for bringing us here. So here we'll be launching, in a sense, something which we always talk about in ADB. The pandemic was only 4 years ago, and sometimes we feel like the world has forgotten about the pandemic. The pandemic has gave us a lot of lessons. For us, it changed the whole world. It changed even how ADB works, because it actually has expanded what ADB engagement in the health sector. And now ADB is sort of we're very good in roads and energy plants, and power plants and all that, but we're now becoming very good at health. And so we now see this opportunity for us to build on the lessons of the pandemic, to make sure that the lessons that we've learned, the actions that the world took, in Asia in particular, will not be forgotten, but we're going to build on that. And this is for this reason that during the pandemic, we in ADB work with a lot of national regulatory agencies. We call it RVAG. We work with countries. We help them procure vaccines. We engage manufacturers, both from the public side and the government side, and try to see how we could help them strengthen their manufacturing capacity. We got to work with regulatory agencies, so we could provide technical assistance, provide them with intelligence, provide them with whatever they needed to strengthen them. We work with the private sector, and that's one strength we have. We ADB, as an international organizations, we work closely with the private sector, so we could get to fully understand what was in the future, what was in the pipeline. And of course, we work with a lot of think tanks and all that. And we see that, I think sometimes the problem is when these different players, NRAs, manufacturers, governments, think tanks, don't talk to each other. We're missing a lot. We're missing a lot of opportunities. So we at ADB said, no, why don't we since we are considered an international organization, an institution that people can work with, we will informally get everybody to work together in what we call the Asia Pacific, and this is what we're launching now with the Asia Pacific Diagnostics, Vaccine, and Therapeutics Network to counter epidemics and other disease outbreaks. So the ambition clearly is huge. But we see this as a platform. We see this not to replace our friends from WHO. I think there are friends from WHO here. Not to replace existing networks of NRAs, that's where our existing platforms, organizations of manufacturers working together, but rather as a platform, a venue for common-minded people, like-minded people like all of us, to see how we could all contribute. And of course, we bring in something new. We are a development bank. You don't usually see us in discussions like this. And we also bring in new resources that's a little different. We're not a grant-giving organization like our friends from Wright. We are not a usual vibrate bank. We are a development bank that can actually provide and mobilize resources to help developing member countries to make sure that when the next pandemic happens, we will no longer hear countries in Asia and the Pacific talk about vaccines were not there, diagnostics were late. I always love to say one of the things that actually got me so angry during the start of the pandemic is when there were countries who decided not to export face masks. That was just amazing, right? something so simple, which is a face mask, was, because they say they're running out of face masks. So the manufacturer decided not to export. If something as simple as face masks can be stopped during a pandemic from being sold to other countries, imagine. And of course, we don't have to talk about it. I think all of you know what has happened eventually. So hopefully we'll have a very productive discussion, and we welcome and we thank you for joining us in this launch of Advance. So we have a nice name. So we want to advance, and we look forward that after this, we'll have more constructive So I now give the floor to Jay. Thanks a lot and welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banjong, for the very inspiring, welcoming remarks. Really, it's a partnership. We can't just do it ourselves. And we have all those partners here, from governments, NRAs, MOH, academia, development partners, everyone. So I hope it will be a really richful conversation here. And then for the next presentation, I would like to invite Dr. Dinesh Arora. He's a principal health specialist from our team. And he'll be giving a presentation on setting the scenes on strengthening vaccine therapeutics and diagnostic manufacturing and regulatory oversight in Asia Pacific. Dr. Dinesh, please.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I know sessions after lunch are difficult, but I'm sure this big crowd here just shows me that there's a lot of enthusiasm. What made ADB go into vaccines and regulation? Let me give you a context here. We had, during COVID, countries asking for vaccines. ADB was flushed with money because Philip is sitting here, our procurement guy, who leads this. $9 billion we earmarked for vaccines for developing member countries. But we could not procure vaccines because WHO usual was not there still. And what is the guarantee a bank takes that the vaccines clear the triple test of safety, efficacy, and quality? Now, this is where we were struggling, but we also felt that the countries required some kind of a hand-holding. We are not experts on this. We are a bank, right? We scale things up. John is looking at me and saying, why Dinesh is talking about all this? Because we needed partners here. And that's why, can you go next slide, please? We went with something called Regional Vaccine Advisory Group. 4 years down the lane, Ben was one of the founding members for this. We said, can we bring a platform where the national regulators could guide countries of how to go about vaccine procurement and vaccine supply and delivery? And this is where Dodo has taken this initiative of coming up with Advance, which is perhaps one step ahead of this, of why only regulators, but also perhaps manufacturers, DMCs, the private sector, all coming together, think tanks, academics, to come together, share things, and move forward. So perhaps I'm preempting one question from my moderation discussion is, what was one of the biggest lessons which we took was weak regulation in many countries, which was preempting us not to provide vaccines. Can we go next slide, please? I will just give you one example. In fact, a couple of examples I had. We had a country X who said, look, we have procured vaccine Y, which has been cleared by WHO. Now, please reimburse this cost. Now, that vaccine was a multi-dose vaccine. WHO had cleared only a single-dose vaccine from the same unit. Can we finance that? Is it under contract manufacturing? The answer was no. But then, who is ADB to tell DMCs that, no, this is not the same vaccine? So we faced a backlash from the country X saying that, look, guys, 1 dose, 5 doses, same thing. What's wrong with this? Same vaccine, same manufacturer. Now, we went tell them, no, there has to be an adjuvant, there has to be new preservative, these are different vaccines. It couldn't help. So at that time, when we roped in RVAG, we had Australia TGA head and WHO coming and presenting to them that, look, multi-dose viral vaccines is different from single dose. And in fact, it's under scrutiny, and very soon we will have the approval. And it happened like this. So we need some credible voice across Asia Pacific which could support us. But Advance is going one step beyond it. Here we are talking about not only advice, but how do we support your increasing regulation. Core NUS, Syed are sitting our partners who are helping us in doing strengthening regulation in Bangladesh. Similarly, what about newer challenges, climate and health? Do we have regulators today with capacity to say, hey, if you are doing health insurance or doing reimbursement, let's have an implant which has less carbon. Let's have medicines, therapeutics which are less carboniferous. I don't think so we have that capacity. And this is perhaps where we are trying to come up with more emerging topics on these issues. And of course, how do we pool the demand, come together and use economies of scale and get prepared for the next pandemic. Next, please. I'll take a couple of slides on what ADB is doing in Bangladesh. Can you go next, please? So this is what Dodo and Jay were mentioning initially. The vision is all ADB members have the fastest possible access to essential medical products. We talk about vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics, with regulated safety, efficacy, and quality. Next, please. The functions will be to exchange information, contribute to strengthen regulatory capacity, eventually leading to enhanced preparedness and capacity, and also increasing costs of economy, using economy of scale to generate costs which are much more feasible and sustainable. We are also talking here about not only vaccines during pandemics, but even adult vaccines, adult vaccination which is happening across the world, and also having manufacturers and international organizations at part of it. This is more of a network rather than any formal alliance we are saying, but a network and a platform which can make all the key stakeholders come and share information. Next, please. 2 slides on what we are doing in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, we are providing a roughly about $388 million financing to set up a manufacturing unit within a state-owned enterprises. Can you go next slide, please? How do you decide to finance a manufacturing unit? We have seen during H1N1 Ebola, the glut of manufacturing units. Does the market study feasibility suggest we can manufacture vaccines everywhere? No. The answer is, 1, you should have a longer, bigger internal market like Bangladesh has. 3 million birth cohorts every year. They are right now dependent on Gavi. I have Sushant here, but they will transition out very soon in 2029 from Gavi. So what do we do? Sorry, Faisal from Gavi, sorry. So what do? We have to have a plan to see when Bangladesh transits out, it doesn't spend its foreign exchange only in buying vaccines at a higher rate than where it can produce. The market is ready, ingredients are ready, manpower is there. They need to strengthen their regulation, which we are also supporting. And perhaps the lesson which came up in pandemic was self-sufficiency to a greater extent. Can we have one manufacturing unit fully functional, which can be repurposed during pandemics and start preparing vaccines which is required there? This should have both the technologies of conjugate, but also the newer technologies of mRNA, which we should bank upon. So in this, Bangladesh has a roadmap. We have our colleague from Bangladesh who will be presenting. They have passed the Bangladesh Drugs and Cosmetics Act, which we were also part of them, IP Act. We are part of the Institutional Development Plan, which DGDA, the regulator, is doing. So very soon, the work we will be setting up the unit, and perhaps the first step will be to move towards fill and finish of certain key vaccines. Next, please. Similarly, as I mentioned, manufacturing and regulation go hand by hand. There was a time where in country X, when we were supplying vaccines, they were not even competent to issue letter of content, letter of analysis of those vaccines. The release letter could not be done. So we had to depend on either a neighboring country to what we call as regulatory harmonization to get that letter released. But I think it's important every country gears up for quality. And perhaps these are the few important things which we picked up. We're also supporting Bangladesh in setting up of a national control lab, their human power, and also their post-marketing surveillance as they produce their own vaccines. So that's what we are doing in Bangladesh as part of our manufacturing and regulation. The idea here is that we pick up a country which has a feasibility to manufacture vaccines. The idea is also to export vaccines, but then that could take a few years, maybe 10 years down the lane. Could we have a project coming up which just solely depends on exports? So some of the countries are those which can actually immediately go for vaccination. The second country is Pakistan. The birth cohort is about 5 to 6 million, double of perhaps 1.5 times of Bangladesh. They're also graduating out in 2032, most likely. That's a plan they have. I'm sure we are also working with them to see what plans they have when they are transitioning out of Gavi subsidy and how do they have vaccines available. Now, vaccines are not only for childhood vaccines, but also for adult, also for antimicrobial resistance, also for newer diseases like malaria, dengue, TB, the newer vaccines which are coming. And we will be marketing to all those vaccines as part of Advance. In Advance, we come forward for having a market for manufacturing vaccines where we provide the support to the countries, get the best stakeholders across countries on one side to get the best advice and move forward. I'll stop here. I think I'm within the time. And thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh, for setting the scene. It really helped on being all of us on the same page. And I forgot to mention to thank the people online who is watching this session in the YouTube live stream. So thank you for watching as well. So for the next sessions, we will be having 4 panel discussion in very interesting sessions that Dr. Dinesh and Dr. Banzon has mentioned. So the first panel discussion will be on supporting vaccine therapeutics and diagnostic manufacturing and technology transfer. And we will be having a section on regulatory capacity building, regulatory harmonization and convergence, and the procurement of vaccine therapeutics and diagnostics. So I would like to first invite the moderator for the first panel discussion, Dr. Dinesh Arora, and the panelists to the stage. You can have a seat over there at the chair. So it will be Mr. Faisal Giliani from Gavi, Dr. Hani Kim from Right Foundation, Mr. Mujahidur Rahman from EDCL, Bangladesh, Dr. Sushant from IBI, and Mr. Syed from Tech Convention. So welcome, everyone. Please give a big hand.
Well, thank you, Jay. Hope I'm audible. Right, I think this is a very distinguished panel. I have on with me a country representative from Bangladesh who is actually going to implement manufacturing of vaccines. We also have our colleague from the Director General of Drug Administration with the regulator. Thank you so much, sir, for being there. Hani, you are a global name today when we talk about technology transfer, right? And how do we handle the manufacturing of vaccines with the newer technologies? I'll come back to you on that question. Sushant, thank you so much for coming again. We had met at Singapore, and we look forward to your guidance on how we work together and moving forward. Faisal, I think Gavi has done a phenomenal job so far. But how do we work further is another question I'm going to ask you then. And of course, Syed. Thank you, Syed, for being our partner in our journey on vaccines. I think, Faisal, you have to leave early, so I'll pick choose on that. What measures are critical to advancing manufacturing capacities for vaccines in Asia, as I showed you for one country, but how do you ensure pandemic preparedness for future health emergencies using vaccine as a tool? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh Arora. When you were speaking, I thought Gavi is speaking up on the stage on all the vaccine manufacturing, pooling resources, demands, and investing. So you have, I think I have to now reduce my
I hope
my
you're not saying that I copied your slides.
So thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I would like to be as brief as possible, but one step back, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, was created in 2000 to address the inequities for life-saving vaccines. So manufacturers were were only manufacturing for higher prices, low production, but Gavi was created to address this and ensure that vaccine reaches the low and low middle income countries around the world. Fast forward, we have immunized 1.1 billion children in last 23 years, saved 18.8 million lives, or we call it deaths averted, through immunizing and contributing $220 billion of economic benefits through this support to 78 countries around the world. It's Gavi is not a charity model, I must say. It's more an empowerment model where we encourage countries to co-finance and also transition out. Danish mentioned Bangladesh is transitioning out, Pakistan is transitioning out, but 19 countries have already transitioned out for this support. And largely it comes to the market shaping. I think that's the topic I've been given on how Gavi supports vaccine market shaping and what are the key steps needed in post-pandemic COVID pandemic. The pandemic has pushed us back and let us realize where we are heading and how we can address some of the challenges. The first key lesson learned from COVID pandemic is the lack of financing or surge financing. This is something Gavi has worked together with our partners and donors and multilateral development banks. We are in discussions with Asian Development Bank and hopefully signing MOU later this month, is to provide financing for such pandemic situation. So we have now set up a day zero financing facility with $2.5 billion to made available. Out of that, $500 million is a first response fund. And within weeks of announcing it in June, after our board meeting, we were tackling the Mpox and immediately allocated or even signed a partnership with vaccine manufacturer in Germany, Bavarian Nordic, with $50 million surge financing to secure vaccines for affected countries in Africa. So financing is the first major requirement to tackle any such situation or pandemic. The second lesson learned was regional vaccine manufacturing. So how it could be broadened. This is one of Gavi's core competencies or work. When Gavi was launched, we had only 5 WHO pre-qualified manufacturers around the world. And one of them was in Republic of Korea back in 2001. And fast forward, we have now 19 WHO pre-qualified manufacturers around the world in 12 countries, and 10 of them are in Asia, and now 2 in South Korea. There are many, but the ones we procure from. And even in South Korea, almost 99% of our oral cholera vaccine is procured through EU biologics in South Korea. And we spend almost $100 million a year procuring vaccine from the country. In light of COVID, we also launched a regional vaccine manufacturing initiative, how we encourage countries, regions to come forward and ensure the adequate supply. We saw the countries closing their borders for vaccines export and so on when COVID struck. So our first such initiative was launched on 20th June in Paris during our next 5 years investment opportunity, where there's about 7 donors came together and pledged $1.2 billion to launch the African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator, where we are pooling these resources to support manufacturers, public or private or joint, in Africa to come up with their own vaccines. Currently, Africa has 20% of world population, but only 0.1% vaccine production or contribution towards the globe. And African Union has set up a goal of having 60% of their needs covered by 2040. And Gavi is very much behind this initiative to support. So we will, combining these two, we're really looking forward to MDBs like Asian Development Bank or Islamic Development Bank and others who have, or AIIB, to come forward with countries to provide financing. You're already working on that. It was music to our ears. But also encouraging manufacturers to come forward and play their share for to reach the vaccine to every child or every human around the region or the globe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we can clap. If we shouldn't be so miserly with the clap, please. No. Absolutely, Faisal. And while you really spoke about the pandemic preparedness and the financing which Gavi provides and which MDB is also pitching, we're actually also looking forward through their MOU, and I think Dodo is here, of how do we support countries when they're transitioning out also. I really love the word when you say it's not charity, but empowerment. So I think ADB is also will be part of this journey through Advance, where we want to empower the countries when they transition out of the Gavi subsidy and move forward. But thank you so much for your intervention. Dr. Hani Kim, if you have vaccine manufacturing, as we discussed, how do you see technology transfer in building self-sustaining health systems that can respond to future pandemics?
Thank you, first of all, for inviting myself to represent Right Foundation for this important discussion. So to answer that question, I think we need to sort of step back and think about what the essential building blocks of self-sustaining health system are. And the two critical components of the six building blocks are, first of all, personnel. So we need people, and we need skilled people that could actually develop and make available essential health technologies, essential in the sense of what is needed to protect that particular population. So what does technology transfer do when we think about what role it can play? As many of you in this room understand, technology transfer is just not a matter of handing down a recipe or experimental protocol to somebody. It actually requires a commitment to educating and training, to upskill and reskill. So as we engage in technology transfer, what the act of doing so, what that translates into doing, is actually to reduce the gap in the level of knowledge that are currently concentrated in a handful of countries. I think Faisal mentioned, and back in 2001, only 5 companies had ever pre-qualified vaccines. So we've learned during the pandemic, and this has been recently reported by WHO, that health inequity is rooted in concentration of resources, both material resources and immaterial resources such as knowledge. So tech transfer, when done right, and I would love to see another session next time that's focused on how we can learn about doing tech transfer right. I think we don't understand what that looks like right now. So if it's done right, it has that potential to contribute to reducing the gap in the level of knowledge that's necessary for R&D, for essential health technologies. And if we achieve that, then it has the potential to reduce the reliance of the countries that are relatively resource constrained, or to be blunt, to be deprived of material resources on other countries that are wealthier. So those are the roles that I see that tech transfer can play in supporting self-sustaining health system in the long run.
Thank you, Dr. Hani. Absolutely, resources as well as tech transfer, they both go hand in hand. And happy that we will be working together to understand how Advance can take it forward, and Right will be an essential member for this. Thank you so much for the same. Now let me turn to a country example here. Dr. Mazahuddin Rahman, he is the Deputy Manager for Quality Control, Bangladesh, from an Essential Drugs Company Limited, which is a state-owned enterprises. Now this has manufactured IV steriles, antibiotics, penicillin, but not vaccines. But this is the big step which the company is taking. And we have a middle management represented today, the one who actually work on the field, the one who actually represents how a company can be upgraded. So maybe Dr. Mazahuddin, if I can ask you, I think you have a small presentation to make on the Bangladesh project. And perhaps my question to you will be, what are the challenges you foresee in maintaining the quality and coming up with the manufacturing of the vaccines in a state-owned enterprise like EDCL? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for inviting me here. I would like to thanks all of you and the organizer also. And actually, I am the team of project management, and during COVID of Essential Drugs Company Limited, actually, it's a fully government pharmaceuticals company in Bangladesh, and we are doing more about 70% of our medicine have consumed by Bangladesh people. Most people are consuming our product, and Dr. Dinesh already told all sort of things. Actually, EDCL management, if I come to the question, actually, EDCL management faced challenges in getting technical assistance to implement, develop this project, actually, focusing especially on the areas of quality control, I mean the manufacturing quality, technology transfer, regulatory advisory services especially, and process optimization in a whole total pharmaceutical strategy. So moreover, our project is going to be WHO pre-qualified, and of course the facility will be a WHO approval. That's our goal, actually. So in do that, I'm going to present my presentation. Is it okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, sure.
Next slide, please.
Thank you. That's the vaccine therapeutics and diagnostics mission and vision. Is increasingly more and more drugs are being produced from biological sources, especially ranging from purified proteins to revolutionary gene therapeutics. At EDCL, we aim to build our capacity across board with particularly focus on protein vaccine and mRNA technologies. Protein vaccines can be produced from design to vaccination stage within 100 days, but the key is to choose the optimal technology. Next, please. During COVID, we have seen that political alignment is of paramount importance. Sharing research findings, data, and insight is critical for evidence-based policy making. To fight against unknown biological enemies, regional and global collaboration will be the strategical weapon to track and fight against future health emergencies. Next, please. As soon as the outbreak is declared, we must have the right platform to address the issues. The SSB approach to vaccination emphasizes a rapid force strategy for implementation and aiming for rapid herd immunity also. At EDCL, we expect and hope that a fruitful collaboration of technology transfer and innovation can be done with global partners. Next, please. Vaccination plays a crucial role in biosecurity to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. Historically, Bangladesh has done very well for vaccination, mainly due to constant supply by Gavi. But by 2029, as Dinesh mentioned earlier, Gavi will be stopping such support, and we must build our own capacity. Next, please. Already a couple of our private biopharmaceuticals have produced vaccines, and our local authority, Drug Administration of Bangladesh, DGDA, providing them marketing authorization. And hopefully, by strengthening the DGDA project also, as Dinesh mentioned earlier, we're gonna have a better opportunity for our people, for our country betterment, to implement this project, this VTD project, actually. Thank you so much, and thanks you again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muzahideen, and I also acknowledge the presence of my colleague from DGDA, from the regulation side. Thank you. Dr. Sushant, what do you think governments, now you've seen a presentation from a government representative here, what is required to support government initiatives for increased R&D and sustainability? How do we get the latest vaccines for them? Thank you.
So I think I have some slides here. Was there a? Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah. So again, thank you so much for inviting me here. So what I will do is probably this will be two-part. First, I will go through the presentation to give the context, and maybe after that I can respond to your question, Dinesh. So as Dr. Banzon basically mentioned, right, we have already forgotten about the COVID-19 and what was the impact. So this is just to remind that we are only 2 years into this catastrophic event that has happened everywhere. And then if you look at the rates, the dates, as well as the number of cases, there are various projections about that, but anywhere between 7 million deaths to about 18 million deaths so far. What is more important is beyond the number of cases and number of deaths, we also need to think about the financial implications of COVID-19 pandemic. And I think there are, again, various projections as well as various calculations for this, which goes anywhere between $4.4 to $5 trillion effect on the economy in 2020, 2021 to about 91% of the global GDP, which comes to around $137 trillion. So that impact is quite huge beyond the life as well as lives lost as well as the disease affecting. We need to also think about what has been the financial impact of this particular pandemic. So if you have to think about taking a backseat and what exactly has happened during COVID-19 and what should be the lessons learned as well as the inequities that were there during COVID-19 pandemic. Initially for vaccines only, I'm not talking about the whole ecosystem here, but for vaccines as well as for taking care of the future pandemics, there are 5 major areas which we think there was a bit of inequity. Diagnostics. We did not have proper diagnostic in many of these countries where COVID-19 was first started to report. And then if we cannot measure the outbreak, if we cannot measure the disease, it's very difficult to plan for those things in these countries. The second point is about research and development funding. I have a separate slide about that. It's about absence of research and development funding in some of these countries, and wherever it's available, it's a disproportionate use of those available funding for certain specific players. Third is manufacturing, and I think this is something that we have acknowledged, especially in Africa. The manufacturing is lagging behind, and I think there is a plan by 2040. They want to be 60% self-sufficient. So what can be done for those moving forward? Fourth point is about vaccine supply. And yes, there was COVAX. Obviously, it was not a perfect model. There are a lot of things that we can learn from that model. But can we develop something which is more practical moving forward? And can we be ready with that? That's something as inequity that we see. Fourth part, or the fifth part now, is the vaccination. Actually delivering those vaccines which we need for the countries to prepare for the outbreak control. Now, coming to the research and development funding, if you see during 2021, there was about $6 billion. And as Dinesh mentioned, there was $9 billion at ADB for procurement of the vaccine. If you see, and this is only for research and development funding, only 5% of that was essentially given to the developing country vaccine manufacturers network, which is about 47 different manufacturers. And they actually, in the end, produced 60% of the vaccine that was supplied globally. So it was not essentially the lack of funding, but more about how do we proportionately distribute that funding to the right players to make that impact. I think we should think about that moving forward. But all is not bad. What we see on this slide is we have ramped up the facility for global vaccine manufacturing quite rapidly during COVID-19. From December, if you see here, 2020 to about August 2023, we have increased our capacity for only COVID-19 manufacturing to about 14 billion doses, which is huge. And the question also comes, what do we do with that enhanced manufacturing capacity that has been developed in all those countries? On one side, we are increasing the global manufacturing capacity. On the other side, we also are getting a lot of these new manufacturing units being developed in different parts of the world, especially in Africa. So I think how do we manage the increased capacity is something we need to think about. Now, what are the enablers of the ecosystem that we essentially work on the vaccine field? So if you see, there are 3 areas: technology, regulatory harmonization. I think this is a theme that is coming recurrently, and we need to really think about that, and establishing the frameworks. So what do I mean by technology? early access to the technology to some of these manufacturers is going to be the key. IP and know-how. We know that for mRNA vaccine, getting the LNP is going to be something which is a critical piece, which is missing right now under the IP. So what can be done, especially for the manufacturing capabilities that are being developed in African continent? Tech transfers. I think this is a common theme again, as Hani mentioned, as Dinesh mentioned. For regulatory harmonization, national health policies, how do we integrate that with the reliance mechanism between different NRAs and collaborative reviews between different NRAs? And again, for framework establishment, it's about the PPP, flexible financing, and governance and coordination. So there are a lot of things which are mentioned on this slide, but really what we need to think about for the next pandemic is the holistic view of all these points. And essentially, I have highlighted the last point, which is building sustainable academia, industry, and government partnership, the PPPs. Also, there is a good progress on the pandemic agreement now, but can this be implemented at regional level, in Asia, for example, or in Africa? The speed and scale of manufacturing, can we achieve that? For COVID, we got about 250 days to get the first vaccine out. The good news from Rwanda for the Marburg vaccine, within 12 days, the vaccine was essentially used in a research environment, but can we do something better for the 100-day mission? And then investment in capacity building is going to be a key. Plug and play vaccines, I think we need to think about that, but again, there are serious limitations for mRNA vaccines because of IP and few other things that we need to think about. And then just to reiterate the point that global health actually intersects with almost all of the sustainable development goals that we are talking about here.
Thank you so much, Sushant. It's amazing, and I think this also sets the agenda for advance, you know, those are 5 things you were mentioning. But be careful, Jay, that when we talk about VTD, normally vaccines take the whole floor, and we just don't talk about therapeutics and diagnostics. So I think Dr. Benson started with his word diagnostics and face masks. So let's not forget that it's VTD, vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics. And of course, then you did speak about the manufacturing and then also the procurement. And we actually have a session on the fuel procurement and then about the vaccine delivery. But we are still missing one element, and that's animal health. Now, nobody is speaking about animal health. We all know that animal health affects human health. One Health is based on this principle. How do you eliminate human TB when you have so much bovine TB and the interface is so loud? So let me now ask Syed, who represents private sector here. He's been also supporting ADB in different projects capacities. So maybe Syed, over to you. How do we initiate a discussion on animal health vaccine? How do we take forward? And I'm giving this context because Dr. Benson, our director, was in India, and the Niti Aayog member, who's at the rank of a minister, actually requested ADB to say that, what are we doing on animal vaccines? Can we take some leapfrog on the animal vaccine side? Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Dinesh. We have an initiative called the Global Collaborative Center for Medical Countermeasures. We've done this after discussing with various stakeholders across low-middle income countries. And we've also discussed with our regulator in India, where we said, can we look at human and animal vaccines in one center, given that all platform technologies are by and large applicable to both segments, but of course, compliant with all the necessary rules to prevent contamination, validation, cleaning, and so on. So we are in discussion with the Indian regulator on that. I have a 4-minute video to talk about this new initiative. Can I have the video, please?
In a world where superheroes are celebrated for their strength, vulnerabilities do exist, hindering them from reaching their potential. Similarly, in the realm of translational biotech research in healthcare, the Centers of Translational Research Excellence strive for scientific innovation, but encounter challenges in GMP scale-ups with regulatory approvals. Furthermore, we must consider the obstacles encountered in technology transfer, particularly in low and middle-income countries, to facilitate local production. TechInvention's proposition at the Global Collaborative Center for Medical Countermeasures, GCMC, is to establish close collaboration with these centers of translational research excellence for technology development and transfer. At GCMC, the scope will encompass disease and target identification, as well as the use of advanced AI/ML and computational biology tools for biosimulation. It will also include GMP-based cell banking, the development and characterization of cell lines, the selection of suitable platforms for implementing countermeasures, the initiation of shake or spinner flask experiments for USP, followed by DSP, process optimization, and validation for scaling up to produce GMP batches for preclinical and clinical studies, and the provision of regulatory approvals for these activities. These validated, IP-secured, and regulatory-approved technology packs will be facilitated for transfer to existing manufacturing hubs, along with gap analysis, bridging, or to new facilities that will be set up, which is also a core expertise at Tech Invention. Located in the financial capital of India, Mumbai, GCMC is set to emerge as the world's one-of-a-kind center, catering to vaccines, biotherapeutics, from strain to supply. Every feature has been meticulously planned to build solutions that are compliant, competitive, cost-effective, and comprehensive. The lower level will have black utilities in addition to the kill tank, zero liquid discharge system, effluent treatment plant, and rainwater harvesting system. Level 0 has been designed to house a modernized warehouse. Level 1 will house a state-of-the-art sterile formulation and fill unit equipped with a combination line for both liquid and lyophilized vials, pre-filled syringes, and cartridges. Level 2 will be dedicated to the manufacture of GMP-based drug substances encompassing proteins, peptides, and polysaccharides, and will feature 2 suites, one equipped with a static USP line and the other being single-use. Each USP line will be connected to an independent DSP line dedicated to clean utilities. Level 3 will have a centralized, fully integrated quality control department. On Level 4, you'll find a bioinformatics lab, a training center, and essential scientific support departments, including quality assurance, regulatory affairs, intellectual property, legal, and more. The terrace will feature a cafeteria, recreational spaces, clean utilities, and solar panel installations. The facility and operations are being structured around low carbon footprint and climate change sustainability concepts, with various initiatives such as renewable energy, rainwater harvesting, and zero liquid discharge. We envision the concept of GCMC as a game changer towards pandemic preparedness and the accelerated development of medical countermeasures. The output will include tech packs that are IP secured, process optimized, scaled up, validated, and regulatory approved, backed by preclinical and clinical data. Ready for the transfer of technology to identified brownfield projects and greenfield projects supported by Team Tech Invention. At GCMC, we are striving to address all vulnerabilities of superheroes in biotech healthcare, thereby enabling capacity building and manufacturing infrastructure across LMICs. Let's collaborate to accelerate.
Thank you. Last minute, 1 minute. Faisal, if one thing you will like to see post-pandemic, what could be that for pandemic preparedness? One thing out of whatever things we have discussed today.
Many things. I think collaboration.
Collaboration, and advance is one of them.
Yeah.
Sushant.
I think I will agree. So having public-private partnership with a very specific focus on making the products available, not only vaccines as you talked about, but making all those products available to different countries. I think that's going to be the main thing.
Hani.
R&D innovation that is firmly anchored in the value of public health.
Dr.
Yeah.
Barazdir.
It's definitely collaboration with national and international authorities, and the strengthening of the capacity of regulatory authority also, and to make together within collaboration, get every country's in equitable access for vaccine therapeutics and diagnostics. Thank you.
Thank you. Sayed.
A more seamless interface and communication between the human health and the animal health ecosystems.
Well, thank you so much. The message is clear, and perhaps Advance, which we are going to launch today, is a right opportune moment which will showcase both collaboration, which will also work on R&Ds and also perhaps link human with animal health. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for this great interjections. So thankful to you. The panelists will stay back after a couple of other sessions so you can have interaction with them if you have questions or queries, since I'm running out of time and do not have time for open-ended questions. But thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Dinesh and the panelists, for the very fruitful discussion. We really wanted more time for this, for the Q&A, but we are running out of time. So we'll go over to the next session. So the next panel discussion will be on regulatory capacity building. So I would like to invite Dr. Ye Su, the Senior Health Specialist from ADB, as a moderator. And the panelists will be Professor John Lim, from Center of Regulatory Excellence, Duke NUS Medical School, Mr. Roy Himawan from Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Resilience, Indonesia, and Ms. Diane Fontanille from Philippines FDA. So please have a seat. I'll hand over the microphone to Ye.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all the experts in the room. Thank you for joining us in this panel on regulatory capacity development. So, as Jay has already introduced this, today we have 3 experts from our member countries and also from academia to share with us their efforts in regulatory capacity development. We have been discussing how regulation and regulatory capacity has been a key link in the development and deployment of health technologies. Today, we will hear from country experience as well as academia capacity development efforts. I personally work in Indonesia, so I would like to take the liberty to invite my client, Mr. Roy Himawan, to first share about Indonesia's experience in regulatory capacity enhancement. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Ye, for the opportunity, and thank you for ADB for having me today. So I'd like to speak on behalf of the ministry, although it's not an expert one, but we are doing the daily work on this one together with our Indonesian NRA. I believe our colleague also attended today here to the presentation. So this is our view on responding to the need of regulatory capacity building. Well, in the previous panel, we talked about tech transfer importance, and now we are talking about the regulatory capacity importance on having the progress or on preparation for the pandemics. So on the next slide, you will see that as we hold the event on Korea, that hold the tradition on swords. I kindly encourage you to see the Hwando traditions in Korea, a practical and legend single-edged sword. So I would like to associate the capacity building on regulatory experience, regulatory capacity as a sword that we have to make it, that have to be fast, sharp, and wise. Because in pandemic times, when we come to pandemic, all the regulatory authority will feel very under pressed, because they are facing to the condition that they have to make faster decision, but with the limited data available to ensure the safety, quality, and efficacy. And not to mention that to make this more pressure, not only from their boss strengthening the pressure, but also from the public and non-health stakeholders, politicians, academics, all the people will talk to the NRAs, can you do your work faster? So then they will be under pressure for this condition. And while on previous session and on our opening sermon today, we often heard about fast when we talk about pandemic. So then there will be need to fast action in regulatory position to do the action in precisely. But however, we do see that based on WHO estimation, there's a different regulatory capacity across the globe. you may see only 26% of member states of the WHO have functioning NRA. And of them, only 7 NRA from LMICs have achieved maturity level 3. So in the time that you're being pressed to be fast, but you don't have the capacity, so it makes the background that you need to uplift the capacity of regulatory authority. So by having this, we come to the conclusion that there is a need to do creative options of working together in the aspect of regulatory authority. So in the next slide, you will see that for this, can we go to the next slide? For this creative options that we propose on the next slide, please. So we have to swing the sword fast, sharp, and wise. So the creative options that may be able to collaborate, that we have identified that from the experts, several actions can be made, start from the preclinical aspect, goes to the clinical aspect, and goes to the enhancing manufacturing aspect that can be considered as an intervention to make it fast and sharp and also wise. And to do this, at least 5 actions that can be done, we propose that there is need to be collaborators, either it globally or regionally, to do the collaborative actions, including the regulators. So by having this, we do see by having more and more LMIC-based SRAs will empower local vaccine innovations and facilitate vaccine development with regionally appropriate frameworks that will lead us to more a prepared condition to have the pandemics. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much, Ji.
Thank you very much, Pak Roy. I have some questions regarding your presentation, but maybe I will come back to that later, given that we have limited time. May I hand over to Ms. Dane to share about the Philippines experience? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am Dane Fontanilla. I am a regulation officer of the Food and Drug Administration Philippines, specifically under the Vaccines and Biologicals Unit. COVID-19 pandemic actually served as an opportunity for us to improve and strengthen our regulatory systems, especially to ensure a rapid and timely evaluation and approval of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics for future public health emergencies. So to answer the key question, I prepared a few slides. There are 3 key points. Next slide, please. One is the improvement of national legislation or the regulatory policies and guidelines. So the legal framework should be able to adaptive and flexible to sustain or to define the pathway to use for emergency or marketing authorizations for VTDs or the vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics to address the public health needs. For the Philippines, for the FDA Philippines, we implemented the emergency use authorization during the COVID-19, and the principles of regulatory reliance and recognition are adopted to accelerate the evaluation and approval process to ensure immediate access of these products. The FDA also recognized that instituting or adopting good reliance practices would be impactful toward facilitating the access of the VTDs, especially during the public health emergencies. The FDA Philippines also implemented the facilitated review pathway of the FRP through abridged and verification reviews to institutionalize regulatory reliance, as well as the collaborative registration procedure or the CRP with the of the World Health Organization pre-qualified vaccines and drug products. And I believe the 12th annual meeting with the WHO and ASEAN on the CRP will be held tomorrow in Jakarta, Indonesia, to be followed by WHO ASEAN meeting on joint assessment, which will be attended by our fellow delegates from the NMRAs all over the world. So next slide, please. The next key point is the networking and collaboration. This include harmonizing regulatory standards and practices with other drug regulatory agencies and organizations to help ensure VTDs are qualified and to reduce barriers to access. And the networking and a good example of a networking and collaboration of the FDA Philippines is the ASEAN Consultative Committee on Standards and Quality Pharmaceutical Product Working Group, or what we call ACCSQ PPWG. And one of the agenda of the PPWG meeting is the ASEAN Joint Assessment Procedure through Joint Assessment Coordinating Group, which was developed by the national regulatory authorities of the ASEAN member states to facilitate the marketing authorization, as well as to encourage regional collaboration and work sharing among the NRAs. And at the end of the process, the participating NRAs will come up with their individual decision making based on the joint assessment reports, as well as relevant considerations on the national level. Next slide, please. And the last key point is the capacity building activities. It is very essential or important to enhance the competencies and capabilities of our regulators. You have to be equipped to assess the applications, especially for those more complex products, such as vaccines and biologicals, which are most likely be needed during the public health emergencies or pandemics. And for the FDA Philippines, we have internal capacity building activities, such as the retooling of our processes, eco seminars of local and international trainings that we attended, as well as the cascading of working procedures. And we also have from our external experts, external stakeholders, for the training of trainers. Most of our external stakeholders, such as WHO, IVI as well, and Gavi, ADB as well, and APEC, ASEAN, who gave trainings for us for capacity building of our personnel. So next slide, please. Ayun. Salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Day, for sharing your experience. As a follow-up to your presentations, I hear a lot about the faster actions required by regulatory agencies. I hear that there is a lot of need for creative collaborations and, of course, capacity development. I would like to follow up with questions about what capacities do you see most important for national regulatory authorities to enhance post-pandemic. But before that, I think your presentation provides a good segue for Professor John Lim to share some of the collaborations between us and his institution in regulatory capacity enhancement. Professor John Lim.
Thank you very much. Could I have my slides up, please? So, thank you very much to ADB, not only just for inviting me here, but for the ongoing possibilities to engage with you, to support the region. My center now is 10 years old. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. And as you can see from this slide, we are building on a networking collaboration platform and building up to the 2 orange bars on top to strengthen health products regulation in Asia and the Pacific. And also now we're looking at health systems and services regulation as well, building on education, which is specific to this session, and capacity building. But to do this, we also need to provide advice and, of course, to be a think tank as well. In fact, this dream really was when I used to be CEO of the Singapore Health Sciences Authority. We wanted to be an academy to build up the capacity of regulators, and I've been very privileged for the last decade to be able to do this. And of course, this has been specifically also with the ADB in 2 key projects. One from 2017, actually it was 2015 to 2017, when we were looking at the Greater Mekong sub-region to strengthen the regulatory systems in the 5 ASEAN countries of the GMS at the time, looking at malaria interventions, but we covered health products, medical devices regulation. And you can see some of the countries we covered in those years in Laos, PDR, Cambodia, Vietnam. But more recently, for the current project that is still ongoing, where we're looking at strengthening the vaccine manufacturing capacities and the regulatory capabilities to do this. So slightly over a year ago, in fact, many people in this room were at our school in Singapore for a vaccine seminar to look at the amalgamation of science, policy, and practice for fit-for-purpose vaccine technologies. And from this, we have produced various reports. And in fact, one of the follow-throughs is to support Badan POM in Indonesia. And currently, some of my colleagues are now in Jakarta, actually today, conducting training on advanced therapies in support of strengthening Badan POM to become a WHO-listed authority and also to become maturity level 4. So these are very important capacity-building projects. These are 4 of the policy briefs that are coming out soon from the seminar last year. And you can see we are looking at sustainable, locally relevant vaccine R&D in lower resource settings. We're looking at manufacturing and other considerations of vaccine technologies also in low resource settings. Specific, I think, to today is the fit-for-purpose confidence-based regulation across the vaccine life cycle. And of course, this is to support advance as well as a path for Asia and the Pacific to enhance pandemic preparedness. And fourthly, to build sustainable vaccine manufacturing practices in low resource settings. The key recommendations from the regional landscape analysis that is part of this project, not just of the seminar last year, is to look at these 5 countries, Bangladesh, Indonesia, India, Korea, and Singapore. So we're looking at ML4 countries in relation to ML3, or those aspiring to be ML3. And I think what is important for today for us to consider is that the findings suggest that a whole of region approach is very important. It has already been hinted at in the previous session and actually quite explicitly stated by Dr. Eduardo and Dr. Dinesh. But I think we can potentially enhance the coordination of the resource support to strengthen regulatory systems, particularly for the DMCs of the ADB. And we can certainly better leverage and build on existing international and sub-regional regulatory platforms to facilitate the application of more common and aligned regulatory standards to strengthen regulatory cooperation. So I think this is a critical step forward. And in fact, we would like to propose that advance, of course, I think really is part of this, but we do need this regional level regulatory network or alliance in Asia and the Pacific because we want to promote confidence-based regulation. And we also want to promulgate regulatory international best practices. So I think that is really the summary of our work with the ADB so far, and we look forward to working with all of you in the room. And of course, we look forward to advancing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhang Lim. And we really appreciate our collaboration with CORE since 2017. A question for our panels. Particularly from the country's perspective, what do you think that are the critical capacities that your government would like to invest more in enhancing to help your national regulatory authority to reach a higher maturity level?
So thank you, Dr. Ye. And to do this, we believe Indonesia will take a benefit more by having our regulatory capacity being improved. Such like the course now being conducted by Dr. Lim in Jakarta. Now we are learning the ATMP's regulation and how to make it more available to Indonesian population. But we do see that the other method that we can we can call like a creative options to work as a regulator is also available to be explored. So we are very welcome if there is any initiative that work on this one. So then will have better capacity to regulate our pharmaceutical and medical device. Because when we talk about pandemic preparedness, it's not only vaccines, but including diagnostics and therapeutics. So by having that sense, we are looking forward for any creative options that may be put further, like globally coordinated worm base for large agile trials that will able to make our regulatory be more informed and more daily habited with how to support the global large and agile trials. It's also include on how the capability on review and manufacturing oversight. It's also be a good one to be to prioritize and to explore on collaborative inspections and global information sharing. It's also important for the regulators to do on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dane?
For the FDA Philippines, I think our priority is the improvement of our national legislations. Currently, we are still revising, or is still on the process of revising current policies and regulations for the pharmaceutical use and API as well. We also are currently released the rules and regulations for the registration of pharmaceutical product and API for human use, and pharmaceutical product and API intended solely for export. Although we still don't implement it, those policies, since we still have to publish it to the public, but with the leadership of our Director General, we still have a long way to go. And yeah, that's our main priority right now.
Thank you very much. Legislation is the first step. And Professor John Lim?
I think there are two levels we need to look at. One is at the national level, and my colleagues here have already talked about the specific situations in Philippines and Indonesia. Even in Singapore, where we've already reached maturity level 4 and we're a WHO-listed authority, I think there has to be continual upgrading of regulatory skills and capacity, because the challenges never end. So within the national frameworks, we have to continue building on that. So I think academic institutions like my own center, working closely with the National Regulatory Authority, are very important to do this. But also, the other thing that needs to be done is to stop looking purely at health products regulation in a silo of its own. And I think with vaccines, and especially things like advanced therapies, and there was another session this morning looking at AI in terms of products and health services, we need to look at how health products regulation, health services regulation begins to come together more. And this is, I think, something very important for us to consider, even as we're looking at things like One Health and animal health. So we're not just looking at NRAs as we have known them in the past, but we need to be positioned for the future. And I think to do this, we have to work across the region. So what ADB is doing is very critical. And I think ministries of health cannot function in isolation from other players within government, either within national jurisdictions or across the region. So I think that's very important for the future.
Thank you very much. I take that point, and I hope Jay can include in his TA activities that are fostering regional collaboration, and also the collaboration between the drug regulators and the health service regulators. Okay, so I guess my next question is for regional collaboration. Do you see the current mechanism that you're in as effective? I think a few examples were mentioned. The ASEAN have this regulators network, and advance hope to also establish and advance this regional collaboration. What advice would you give to us in implementing this regional network?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ye, for the questions. And this is quite interesting to see that in regional level, we came with a different capacity of regulatory oversight. So by having the fact that every country has different capability, it's important to understand what is the critical point that to be elaborated in every country with the same technical one. Because if we come to every country needed, so you will go to the very different options of improving the capacity. But when we come to but if we can come to a single most prioritized technical level that need to be empowered across the countries, so we can go to something that is more feasible to all countries to implement it. So I mean, just like take example, the regulation on labeling. Regulation on labeling is because we see from the WHO assessment, also from the industries, they're seeking that many countries now imposing a very different regulation on label. Many countries mandate or obligate the industry to put a local language on the package, and many others also mandate the time of release of the package to go to the primary package of a product. So imagine if in a region where there is 10 countries have a different requirement on label, what will happen for an industry who want to come and who produce and who to bring the access of product to that region, he or she will have to make 10 different products. But even though it's also it is a the same product itself. So by having this understanding, we do see that if we can come to a single technical detail that very most important for all countries to implement, it is something that very valuable to work on. Dr. Ye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the harmonizing the regulatory standards and practices in the regional level is very important as well. As I've said earlier, the joint assessment with the ASEAN NRAs is a big help to us as well. As a vaccine importing country, we really need good reliance practice with the ASEAN, with other external stakeholders. So with the continuous PPWG meeting as well is a big help to the improvement of our regulatory system. Thank you.
I would just like to add to that because I think Valerio and I have been involved with ASEAN PPWG since 20 years ago, from the early 2000s. So it's not that harmonization has not been advanced or highlighted as a priority. And in fact, we do have the common technical dossier and requirements that have been around for many years. I think joint assessment has moved it further forward. But what really is important, I think, is that the region must be strongly committed to make this happen. And I think the pandemic challenged this because even though the harmonization efforts were there, exactly what we've heard, it was not possible to have a common ASEAN position on vaccine approvals and dissemination. So I think it actually goes beyond just the regulatory authorities. And what ADB is doing is very critical to bring the other players into the room, because national regulatory authorities, ministries of health in themselves may be well-intentioned, but the ability to effect the things that we're talking about actually goes beyond that. It's engaging the ministries of finance, involving the political leadership. And I think this is what is going to make that significant difference in making harmonization and convergence actually work to achieve what we're talking about today in terms of equity of vaccine development, manufacturing, and availability.
Great, thank you so much with that. We have quickly used up our time. So thanks again to all the panelists for your discussion today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ye, and thank you very much for the panelists. So first we talked about the manufacturing and R&D, and then we talked about the regulatory capacity building and about the situation of the countries. So now we will be talking about regulatory harmonization and convergence, and I would like to invite the panelists upon the stage. It's Dr. Jino Shin from WHO Western Pacific Regional Office, Dr. In-Suk Park from Korea Regulatory Science Center, and Dr. Valerio Reggi, Regulatory System Strengthening in Asian Development Bank. And for this session, I'll be a moderator. I'm Jae Kyun Kim, Health Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. So please have a seat. Thank you. So for our session, we have asked the panelists a single question. So the question is, why are regulatory harmonization and convergence essential for preparing for future pandemics to ensure access to vaccine therapeutic diagnostics, and what key steps are needed? The reason we had one question for all the panelists here is that you could recognize that we have, from different perspectives, we have Dr. Shin from WHO, we have Dr. In-suk Park from the Regulatory Science Center, but also former from Korea Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. And we have Valerio to give perspectives on the Asian Development Bank. So first, I will hand over the microphone to Dr. Shin. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for invitation, so particularly the ADB for this session. And I prepared a few slides because this regulatory harmonization convergence it's actually a really long history, and already it's probably it's part of also regulatory capacity building. The previous panel members discussed and alluded the importance of the harmonization convergence. So just because we talk about many times the convergence and harmonization, but I'd like to give just a little bit of flavor because there's some nuance and understanding difference. So first of all, I brought this. The definition from the WHO, the guidelines, they recently published the good regulatory practice. Particularly this convergence is more on, it looks like because it's already divergent regulation. So one is to go, one probably the one target, something like that. So the different countries, regions, becoming more similar and aligned, over time. So this actually, the scope covers the various, the guidelines and the standard scientific principles. So their, final, a decision making will be always with the national regulatory authority. There is a flexibility in decision making. So some of the part of the process actually involved is a mutual recognition agreement among regulatory authorities, and also the particular interest, like a regional integration, in continent EU, and also recently a lot of developments happening in African continent. And particularly WHO facilitate joint review and the collaborative registration procedures. Because WHO invite the interested manufacturers, provide dossier kind of explanation, and then the global experts and interested national regulatory authority, the professions, they attend and participate those registration, the evaluation, and then the decision will be taken by the national regulatory authority. And so this kind of process actually help reduce the regulatory work by avoiding duplication. So particularly the harmonization is more on the technical standard level. So the best example, I would say, we know much about ICH standards, the quality, safety, and efficacy, and the common technical documents. Those are equally, those members equally adopt into their national regulation. So there is no flexibility in using those standards. And also, WHO has been involved in this process, not the stringent as ICH, but also WHO provides reference standards which is unique. And countries use these international reference standards and develop national standards. So this is one standard, single standard guides clinical dosing of those, for instance, insulin. All those, the biological vaccines are defined by international unit. Actually is from WHO, the collaborative studies. And WHO also developed lots of written standards, but the WHO recommends those countries to adopt fully or partially, depending on the country context and their own legislation systems. And so added value is actually the simplified product development and regulatory approval because it's a single standard. The developers use only one single standard as a guide. So particularly the one summary is regarding uniformity or not. So this is maybe make distinction. So rest of the slides, actually I already mentioned some of the key international organization institutions involved in this regulatory convergence harmonization already long history. So I would probably skip, and also there is regional networks working on this mostly regulatory harmonization on convergence. This long history, actually came from Pan American Health Organization, and recently also the Western Pacific region. The support from the member states, national regulatory authorities, they create this the regional alliance to discuss mostly about benchmarking and the emergency preparedness and so on. So also it's important to understand what other sectors, institutions also doing this same or similar thing before launching this very important advanced kind of network, the ADB, the proposing today is this particularly we are part of also the number of countries part of the APEC trade economic bloc, and also ASEAN bloc. So there are a lot of the initiatives already ongoing in these two trade and economic bloc. So I think this is going to be next step. What are they really doing it, and we really need to understand what actually with them together, what specific this advanced network can do. And so particularly the question, the first question, why part, just reiterate, accelerating approval process through this convergence harmonization. I think this is really one, I think, added benefit. And also the using the same standard, manufacturing, the practice, the using the same standard, make sure the consistency of the product so that, gaining public trust. And because of the sharing resources, the potential saving cost, and also enhancing coordination among regulators and the global, regional, and country level. And particularly, most importantly, the addressing those health equity issues through this the process. I think this is more or less ending. Particularly this process actually also not covering whole aspect of access dimension, but mainly the availability, acceptability, probably, but not affordability, accessibility, those logistic issues. But they can be, covered other topics. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Dr. Shin, for that presentation and for the rich information. We really acknowledge that WHO's work on the NRA Alliance, both in the Western Pacific region and the Southeast Asia region. And we really think that in the advanced network, we need a strong partnership on that part. Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Park for the same question, please.
Yes, nice to meet you. I'm happy to join this panel discussion. Okay. Where is no? Okay. Yeah. I'd like to talk about the importance and necessity of regulatory harmonization in case of the COVID-19 pandemic and vaccines, and what global activities the Korea regulatory body MFDS is carrying out. Several recent studies have reported that unsatisfactory medical demand is increasing, and to resolve this, R&D investment must be increased, and global regulatory harmonization is needed along with increasing market demand. During this pandemic, we have learned the importance of vaccine and the development of innovative vaccines, which not only protect people from infectious disease, but in some cases can even reduce the gap in the severity of the disease. This slide is an excerpt from a research paper on the need for regulatory harmonization in the clinical trial field to promote the development of life-saving vaccines. It typically takes about 10 to 15 years to develop a new vaccine and establish its quality, immunogenicity, safety, efficacy, and durability. Many countries required local, typically safety and immunogenicity data for regulatory approval purposes. This delays regulatory approval and ultimately makes it difficult to conduct clinical studies in a timely manner. The picture on the left side is an analysis of the time it takes to get approval for a clinical trial application from 1999 to 2018. The red graph shows the approval schedule for 931 clinical trials conducted in ICH member countries and compared with data from 23 countries around the world. In a pandemic, timelines may be much shorter, and the temporary legislation may be enacted to streamline in process. In Korea also, a special act on the public health crisis response was enacted in this coronavirus pandemic situation, so that treatments and vaccines could be approved quickly. However, this practice may not apply outside of a pandemic, I think. Therefore, in order for drugs to be approved quickly, even in normal times, not only researchers, but also regulatory authorities need to think about how to achieve regulatory harmonization. Ultimately, regulatory harmonization improves the long life cycle from drug development to use, allowing new products to be applied quickly to patients and also reducing unnecessary expenses in terms of social costs. I think we can find ways to harmonize the regulations through various information exchange, discussions, and mutual cooperation projects. This is a recent example of Korea's ongoing efforts toward international harmony. We joined PICS in 2014 and ICH as a full member in 2016. We supported the rapid supply and development of medicines with our global activities. Through this, we have continued to pursue efforts to converge regulations at government level for faster and better patient access. Recently, GBT, which was evaluated by WHO for its regulatory agency capabilities, was evaluated as achieving the highest level for regulation of competency called ML4 for both medicines and vaccines. And in the end of in 2023, the MFDS became the first country in the world to be registered in the WLL, along with Singapore and Switzerland. Since the coronavirus pandemic, Korea has been collaborating with other countries and international organizations to support domestic products entering the global market and contributed to the international community. We participated in IPRP and served as chair of the biosimilar working group. And in 2018, we participated in the WHO biosimilar PQ working group expert meeting. I believe that these activities and collaboration level have laid the foundation for the success of K pharmaceuticals. Not only regulatory agencies, but also the Korean Pharmaceutical Industry Association, such as KRPIA, KOBIA, and KPBMA, are continuing efforts through various methods to move toward a higher level of healthcare ecosystem through implementation of international harmonization. Korea is working closely with regulatory agency and industry and academia in the drug development process. I hope in near future, our center, Korea Regulatory Center, will also play a role in some strengthening regulatory capabilities. I hope that Korea's good examples for international cooperation and support for the pharmaceutical industry will be helpful in establishing each country's pharmaceutical regulatory system. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Park, especially for sharing the examples of Korea Ministry of Food and Drug Safety on this regulatory harmonization and convergence work. And as you mentioned, it's not just the NRAs, it's also the private manufacturers, academia, research institutions that we have to partner together. And all people here, and also especially the countries with high maturity level for the NRAs, like Australia, Korea, Singapore, Japan. I think there's a certain critical portion of role to do. So lastly, I will hand off the microphone to Dr. Valerio.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have been given 3 to 5 minutes to try and answer the same question as everybody else. The question is why harmonization and regulatory conversion is essential. Now, I propose, well, we need to simplify to respond in a few minutes. So I propose to look at 2 aspects. One is that new medical products are more and more complicated to assess. And this requires skills that are not found everywhere. The other aspect is what has already been mentioned, is that the majority of WHO member states have weak regulatory systems. And for many, if not most, of these countries, the solution cannot come from additional investment. It will not improve the situation by adding more resources and more stuff. It's impossible that all the countries of the world will become able to do everything in the best possible way. So this leads to the need for harmonization of requirements, convergence of regulatory practices. These 2 things would permit better communication among the regulatory authorities and would also enable reliance on the work done by better performing authorities. Cooperation and reliance are concepts that have been endorsed by every man on earth and every woman as well. And, but these are mostly implemented by the best resource authorities among themselves. Why is this not happening in less and middle-income countries? Substantially because they cannot do it by themselves, and there is nobody who is doing it. Nobody is creating a mechanism, a platform, a system, a network, a something that is real, that can be used, and will be able to let participating countries to share information, to rely on each other, to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and to improve mutual trust and capacity to work together. The ADB members, regional members, include 4 of the world's best resourced authorities. You will easily detect what I'm suggesting from this graph. The idea behind an initiative like ADVANCE is to be able to create an actual operational mechanism for the exchange of information so that LMCs will be able to benefit from the outcome of the work done by better performing authorities in the region. I have to declare that I have no conflicts of interest, but I'm looking at one part of this room as a, I mean, the thing is that who is going to do it? ADB alone cannot do that thing. And a national regulatory authority alone cannot do that thing. It needs to be something that is created by putting together the experience of regulators, the experience of academic institutions, and looking at the competence and the agility of the capacity to operate is not strange to my mind. Well, if ADB were able to join forces with casually an institution in a small island somewhere southeast of Asia. It's one of the options that comes to my mind after the discussion we have had this afternoon. I hope that I've done it in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Valerio. Especially the part kind of struck on why it's not done in the LMICs. So it's quite definite that it is really helpful for the LMIC countries, but also we have to find a sweet spot that it should be beneficial to the high-income countries as well. So that could be a further discussion on how we can find that modality. And thank you for emphasizing the importance of partnership. ADB, we can't do it ourselves, and the single NRA can't do it. But we saw a lot of stories and heard stories from the countries, like they're very innovative therapeutics, diagnostics, but because it wasn't approved, they can't use it. It's based on the capacity. It could be like a political, but this kind of an initiative could really help that kind of situation. So please give a big hand to the panelists again. Thank you so much. And now we'll be moving to the last panel discussion on pool procurement for vaccine therapeutics and diagnostics. So I would like to invite Dr. Benjamin Coughlin from the Asian Development Bank and the panelist, Mr. Luigi Bonafati from RVMC, Mr. Philip Kalpaxis, procurement specialist from ADB, and Professor Udeni from Monash University. And unfortunately, Ms. Hui Yang from Global Fund and Christopher Lim from PAHO couldn't join us in person, but they will be participating as a pre-recording video. So over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Jay. Thanks everyone for your patience. I see the room still mostly packed, and we're right at the end of the day. So we've heard about regulation, we've heard about manufacturing, and I think we need to explore another lever, perhaps, for making medical countermeasures affordable, supply chains reliable, and to bring innovation into supply chains, things like climate change that Dinesh started off, biosafety, which has come out through conversations here. And one measure we haven't really tapped is pool procurement options. They've sort of been at the fringe of things, but it's not an area where ADB has really played in. So we brought together 5 experts today to talk about that. Now, before we get into discussing how pool procurement could work feasibly in Asia Pacific, we asked Udeni from Monash University the question, a what-if question. What would have happened or could have happened within Asia Pacific if we had a pool procurement for COVID vaccines? So we're starting out with that question perhaps to give us a little impetus to do more on pool procurement. So Udeni, please.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone for the invitation to speak as part of the panel. So just to start off things, I'm not a professor, just a research fellow at the Center for Health Economics at Monash University. We are a 30-year-old research center working a lot in the area of health financing, health regulation, HTA, health technology assessments within Australia as well as broadly in the Asia Pacific. So in this project, we kind of did a what-if analysis. So we set out wanting to look at how the Asia Pacific countries fared in terms of procuring COVID-19 vaccines between the 2021-2023 period, and also as part of it, looked at what the situation could have been had there been a pool procurement mechanism operational within the region. So, right, so before I share some extremely preliminary results with you, there's a few caveats that need to be set up in terms of how this analysis took place. One of the biggest stumbling blocks that researchers face in doing this kind of analysis is the limited transparency when it comes to pricing. Particularly an issue around COVID-19 vaccines, there's a lot of NDAs. So pretty much authentic pricing information is very hard to come by. Yet, so our approach was to bring together a number of different validated sources, cross-validate the different numbers that have been indicated in terms of volumes, as well as the prices for different kinds of vaccines, and then pull together the analysis from the pooled data. So we very much rely on the weighted average pricing whenever that's reported in these official sources. And what we essentially did was we looked at a pool procurement system that was in place during COVID. There are a number of different examples, but we went with the PAHO system as an exemplar, and really looked at trying to map countries in the Asia-Pacific region with similar countries in the PAHO bloc to see how they fared with regards to different vaccines. So the examples that I have up there are very preliminary examples calculated for one particular type of vaccine, which is the Pfizer-BioNTech. And we kind of match countries based on their GDP per capita and population. And there's never a perfect match. We are never going to find a country with both those metrics. So we go by at least one of the metrics, right? So the first case that we have here is where we looked at Bangladesh and compared it to Bolivia. Now, Bolivia is a relatively small country in the PAHO region, but in terms of per capita GDP, the two countries are quite similar. And working with the weighted average prices for the Pfizer vaccine, we see on your left-hand side, the prices, or the average weighted price paid for the vaccine over the 3 years by Bangladesh has been consistently higher than what was paid by Bolivia as part of PAHO. Now, this may or may not be true. Again, we're working with weighted average prices here. But what does that translate to in terms of volume, which is what is the important question. And you see on your right-hand side, just in terms of 2022, the peak of the pandemic, this pricing differential in what Bangladesh and Bolivia has paid would have accounted for an additional 87 million doses approximately of that particular type of vaccine to be purchased by Bangladesh. And over the 3 years, a cumulative savings of a substantial amount as well due to the price differential. So that was one example we worked with. The other one is for two smaller countries in both the regions, Tajikistan versus Honduras. They're similar by and large in population, but again, in terms of GDP per cap, Honduras is in a much higher position than Tajikistan. And again, when we do a similar comparison on the right-hand side, you see, due to the price differential, just with regards to what was paid for the Pfizer vaccine, that would have accounted for an additional 1.8 million doses at the peak of the pandemic. So this is just very preliminary results here. We're continuing with this project, but by and large, it kind of highlights the importance, I guess, of having a pool procurement mechanism, at least with regards to the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Adani. I think we heard in the first session costs, were the lever for Bangladesh, right, to transition out of Gavi. So what are they going to do to change their manufacturing regulatory systems? And so maybe this in terms of, emergency responses, pool procurement for emergency supplies of medical countermeasures, the finances perhaps are pointing us to much more collaborative measures for purchasing our essential medical products. So in that vein, I think we're going to look at two pre-recorded messages from arguably two of the best and most well-established pool procurement mechanisms, one at the global level from Global Fund and one at the regional level in the Pan American Health Organization. So we'll go first to Hui Yang from the Head of Supply Operations at Global Fund.
Good afternoon. My name is Hui Yang, the Head of Supply Operations at the Global Fund. First, I want to thank Asia Development Bank and partners to call this initiative to life. I'm delighted to share our perspective on how pool procurement mechanisms can improve access to health products such as diagnostics and therapeutics, especially in the face of future health crises such as pandemics. In pursuit of Global Fund's mission to defeat HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, ensure a healthier, safer, and more equitable future for all, we raise and invest more than $5 billion a year to fight these diseases and strengthen health system and pandemic preparedness in more than 100 countries. Since 2002, our partnership has saved 65 million lives, but there is more work to be done in the face of great challenges such as climate impact, geopolitical crisis, and others. Global Fund's strategy aims to support integrated systems for health to deliver impact, resilience, and sustainability, and contribute to pandemic preparedness and response. Remain agile to respond directly to the rapidly evolving global health context. Every year, the Global Fund invests more than $2 billion in health product procurement, and majority is transacted through our pool procurement mechanism and OneBoard.org procurement platform, one of the largest global platforms in the public sector to date. Building on lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, we have developed next-gen market-shaping approaches to drive equitable access to quality-assured health products for the people and communities the Global Fund serves. Our market-shaping efforts leverage our country-led model and inclusive partnerships with countries, civil society organizations, global and regional partners, and private sector. An important component of our next-gen market-shaping efforts include supporting regional collaborations for procurement. Why are we doing this? We consider this critical for improving the availability and affordability of quality-assured health products for more equitable access to meet the needs of people and communities. A well-developed and functioning regional procurement platform will contribute to a more resilient supply chains that can continue to provide crucial health products despite global disruptions and accelerate the introduction of new products when needed. Effective collaboration and coordination will enable greater impact to collective buying power and support market sustainability. What specifically we are doing? We are actively engaging with the global and regional actors to enhance the procurement platforms and consortiums. We focus on knowledge transfer and capacity building at national and regional level. This includes improved availability of market information and increased regional harmonization and regulatory pathways. In addition, we are incentivizing suppliers to meet harmonized quality assurance standards by leveraging global fund tenders. Finally, we are enhancing our approach to collaborative procurement through an updated procurement policy. Along with this, we are continuing to leverage the global pool procurement One Board platform as an enabler for strengthening the capacity of regional and national procurement channels to support sustainability and access to health products. Complementarity is an important feature of our efforts. While PPM focus on HIV, TB, malaria products, we recognize that commodities for neglected tropical diseases and antimicrobial resistance are better managed regionally. Openness to sharing information will be equally critical. This includes providing access to our long-term agreement and joint tender approaches, as we have done so with PAHO in the Americas for many years. It is important to highlight that the Global Fund promotes a value-driven procurement approach. Factors considered in our procurement decision include beyond just pricing, such as quality, transparency, use of long-term agreements, total cost of ownership, sustainability of supply, and risk management. It would take collective determination, sustainable investment, and country commitment to build a well-developed, well-managed national procurement mechanisms. As we progress on this work, we are very keen to collaborate with ADB as they evolve their plans for regional pool procurement mechanism in Asia region, and I look forward to the outcomes of the productive discussions that will emerge from this meeting and to our continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Wei Yang. I think there's a lot in there that we need to really dissect, and Philip and Luigi are going to help us do that. We're going to turn now perhaps to the gold standard in terms of pool procurement, I guess the longest standing, which is PAHO. So we're going to hear now from Christopher Lim, who's the chief of their strategic fund for public health medicines.
Hi everyone, and a very good afternoon to everybody. My name is Christopher Lim. I'm the chief of the PAHO Strategic Fund, and it is a pleasure to be able to join all of you today, although not in person due to some personal reasons, but at least virtually to be able to discuss about this very important topic, which is also close to our mission at PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, which is the power of pool procurement to advance equitable access to life-saving vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. With a collective experience of over 6 decades, PAHO's revolving funds for vaccines and strategic fund for public health supplies have provided essential health technologies to 42 countries across the Americas. And through the funds, we have consolidated regional demand and offering countries to access quality-assured health technologies at affordable prices. But I'd also like to highlight that pool procurement is just but the culmination of a lot of precursors and foundational work before that. The funds represents a model of technical cooperation with many departments within PAHO to build capacity within countries to manage technical cooperations related to regulatory, clinical, and supply chain management, which helps to facilitate efficient access to vaccines and medicines. Now, with this support, we ensure that all these technologies procured through the funds meet strict international WHO and PAHO quality standards. The trust and collaboration we've built over with our member states and partners are foundational to this success. And if you were to ask me, the single most critical success factor I would attribute is solidarity and shared visions and objectives among member states, along with robust technical cooperation, are key factors in achieving health security and supply resilience. Now, the other just as important element that I will attribute to is the regulatory harmonization and reliance across NRAs or national regulatory authorities of participating countries. Now, one of the ongoing examples that we have is on the development of regional manufacturing for vaccines. Now, we are currently working to harmonize regulations and establish reliance framework that empower countries to rapidly approve and produce quality assured vaccines that is accessible to all member states in our region. And these actions create not only self-sustaining regional supply chain, but also at the same time reduce our dependency on external sources and enhance our ability to respond swiftly to emerging health threats. Now, this is indeed a very timely opportunity whereby all regions, including Asia, can help to adapt to these strategies to ensure equitable access to health supply. Poor procurement combined with regulatory harmonization, technical cooperation, and also at the same time collaborative partnerships can help to create a system that is prepared, resilient, and also able to meet the demands of the next pandemic. Now let us seize this moment to strengthen our systems, build trust, and solidify partnerships that can transform access to health technologies across Asia in an equitable way and leave no one behind. Now, we are more than happy to share and exchange experiences to learn collectively. Now, I'm wishing all of you great success in this noble and important endeavor, and all the very best, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. So we've heard the word regional a lot, and we've got someone who has regional on his business card. Luigi, you're from the Regionalised Vaccine, what is it, the last one? Manufacturing Collaborative. And you're the chief advisor to the CEO. So I'm just wondering, Chris talked about, a regional approach to supply and procurement from within PAHO. How do you see this evolving in Asia Pacific? And how do you see us sort of balancing the needs for routine delivery of medicines, essential medicines, but also that surge capacity to supply when we have an emergency?
Thanks, Ben, for the question and allowing me to express RVMC's position. As you said, RVMC has regionalized in it, which doesn't mean regional, but it's the way to bring closer to regions and markets pool procurement. And by doing that, first, there is the approach of pooling demand, which means giving a more sustainable approach to demand. If you look at a country level, demand could be up and down 1 year to another. Shelf life would mean you buy 1 year, you don't buy the next one. So for manufacturing and sustainability of manufacturers, it's very difficult. If you pool the demand, then you have something that is more stable, that is more linear. So behind that, you have more sustainability. Pool demand on the other side and pool procurement goes for volume, which is good. If you're a manufacturer, you want to produce and fill your capacity. But building on capacity, on demand, and having larger volumes means also that the largest manufacturers will have the lowest prices, which means that the name of the game is not equitable again, because the established manufacturer with the largest capacities will probably be able to bid for the lowest price. So you don't rebalance the equation and you don't regionalize procurement if you bid only on price. Now you need to find criteria that allow to rebalance, something that is more equitable. And I think the example of PAO is very good. They announced officially at the CVMN a few weeks ago that for their next procurement exercise, they will change the markup they have for vaccines that are procured within the region. Now, PAO has an experience of pooled procurement of many, many years. But if we're looking at Latin America, vaccines were primarily coming from other regions into Latin America, and they were not favoring local manufacturers. I think this is a very good example that the other regions could try to mimic or to utilize, to think about, is to say, should there be criteria that allow local manufacturers to get an edge? Why? Well, it's very simple. If you have one manufacturer supplying 1 million or two manufacturers supplying each 500,000, those two manufacturers will sell it at a cost of goods which is slightly higher than the one that sells 1 million. You need to adjust for that if you really wish to get a regionalized approach which will go to sustainability, but also a more self-reliable approach to that. So I believe, yes, there is a way to incentivize pool procurement.
Thank you, Luigi. We're going to turn now to Philip, the last hurrah, really, to take us home. So, Philip, you're our resident pool procurement expert. In fact, you just released a publication for the Supply Chain Funders Forum, looking forward to models of pool procurement that are fit for purpose over the next 20, 30 years. So, given what Luigi said, what Chris and Hui Yang have said, how is ADB thinking about this, either at a regional level or through our 5 sub-regions, in terms of pool procurement to optimise equitable, sustainable supplies?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Am I audible? Yes. So yeah, as Luigi mentioned, and many of the previous speakers, right, the recent health crisis have really underscored the need for greater regional cooperation, right? And so I just want to maybe, and I have one slide maybe as a backdrop, to highlight one emerging collaborative procurement initiative that ADB is supporting in Central Asia under the CAREC, or the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Program, which is a partnership of 11 countries that for the last over 20 years, with ADB as its secretariat, has been promoting regional integration and regional cooperation, primarily in areas such as transport and energy and trade. But now, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, health has moved to the focus of the partnership as well. And so ADB has been now supporting through technical assistance the CAREC partnership, among other things, to explore how pooled procurement or collaborative procurement could help countries in securing sustained access to critical health supplies, and also address some of the long-standing issues that we see in the markets in the region, because the map is not there, but you would see that although it is a very diverse group of countries, both in terms of population size and market maturity and their health spending and the health system infrastructure, most of the CAREC countries actually face similar issues when it comes to the availability and the affordability and the quality of certain health products, both for emergency response as well as to meet their routine needs and to achieve UHC. And these issues are actually not unique or exclusive to CAREC. And they're not unique or exclusive to low and middle income countries. We see that many high income countries around the world are equally struggling frequently to access certain health products on their own. And they come to realize the limitations of some of the national solutions. And so we've seen in the last years, and I'd say probably in the last decade, a number of cross-country collaborative procurement arrangements emerging, especially in areas that are not covered by established mechanisms like PAHO, or for products that are not covered like by donor-supported procurement systems like the Global Fund. We've seen a lot in the European region, both at the EU level as well as at the sub-regional level. And increasingly also in other regions, in the Eastern Mediterranean region, in Africa. Just last month, the African Union announced the African Pooled Procurement Mechanism to be led by Africa CDC. So a lot of momentum there, less so in Asia, I will say. But in general, there is a trend that we can consider kind of a global trend of understanding the power of collective action in this space. And there is also growing empirical evidence, and I think Luigi mentioned a few of the potential benefits, that there is potential benefits in pooling procurement, right? There is, from a country's perspective, there is a benefit in potentially shifting the negotiating power towards country buyers. There is, I think, both for buyers and suppliers, it reduces transaction costs in the system as a whole. It allows to build in certain additional activities, such as financing options or market shaping tools that are only possible in the context of a pooled procurement mechanism. And most importantly, it does enhance kind of the resilience of the supply chain, because you have a broader supply base. You can utilize a broader supply base. So there is undeniable benefits to procurement. I will be also giving a word of caution, of course, and I think CARIC countries realize it. It's not a panacea, right? Pooled procurement is not a panacea. There's other factors like broader, geopolitical developments, broader market shortcomings, a general scarcity in health financing and other issues that affect access, right? And it's also not only about let's pool demand and let's buy together. There are other critical elements, regulatory alignment as one of them, sustainable financing mechanism, another one. And we've been, as ADB, through our TA, supporting also those adjacent areas. And actually, Valeria has been leading on the regulatory harmonization side in that initiative as well. I'll just echo what I think Christopher Lim said from PAHO. I think most importantly, it's not a technical exercise. It does require political will, it does require political commitment. And we've seen a number of instances where without this solidarity among countries, some of these initiatives were very short-lived, and others never get off the ground. Big announcements in the beginning, but in the end, they never actually got off the ground. So it is a difficult task. I think CAREC provides a platform that makes us cautiously optimistic that through that, we can build on this existing, long-standing partnership to actually align both a technical and political kind of framework that will allow us to support countries to use pooled procurement as a truly transformative tool in that region, right? For immediate access issues, but also for the longer-term health security in the region. And so, yeah, there is, and hopefully this might also be a pathfinder for other, like for example in the Greater Mekong sub-region, where we also have a regional cooperation platform that could also benefit from learnings from CAREC. So I'll just say in closing that there is no kind of standard solution to this, right? There's a lot of examples out there, interesting examples that we can learn from. None of them is just a boilerplate template that we could just apply to CAREC. And so I just want to make a shout out to Advance, as you know, these are the types of networks that are needed exactly for those countries who are exploring new novel opportunities in procurement to exchange, right? To tap into a wide range of stakeholders as they think through how could this be done in my particular region. So something we intend to achieve with Advance as well.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank all the panelists. I think, it's a complex task, but it requires action on all of these fronts, right? It's got to be a comprehensive response. And ADB is up for the challenge, and it is complex, and it will require collaboration and sustained resources. But we're up for that, right, Dodo? And you're going to tell us about that in your closing remarks. Thank you, everyone.
It's great to see everybody still here, right? So, no, I think we had. I think first of all, our apologies. We only got 2 hours. I was just listening. I think this needs 2 days of discussion. I think it's very rich, very productive. Lots of lessons, lots of potential areas of work that we could be working on. I think there'll be a number of you that will be staying on, right? Will be so when in the next there will be others who will be here also for till tomorrow, so let's keep on having the conversation. So I think as we finish the afternoon, the next question is what would be next, right, for ADB. I think the first is that a very obvious answer. We will soon have an advanced portal because a lot of this information I think should be available to everyone, whether we talk about harmonization efforts that are being done by the different NRAs, or even work that's being done by, it's only now that I realized there are 4 NRA networks, right? But then I was more aware of what ASEAN was doing, but I don't know what's been happening with ASEAN. So a lot of this information are actually there. So we in ADB, we could, how do we call that, consolidate all of this. And we're quite good in maintaining, well, we claim we're quite good in maintaining IT platforms. So we'll make sure that this will soon come out, that we'll have this platform to be available to everyone. And so it will be much more easier to be. I think we'll continue to convene everyone, both the NRAs, the manufacturers, the consulting firms, the experts who are here. Valerio, actually I saw him this morning, forgot who he was, because it was like 12 years ago when we were talking about malaria and all that. But in a sense, I think that should not happen again. I think we should all show our faces because I think this interaction is very critical for us to move forward, because we're all like-minded individuals here. And we're all kindred spirits here. We in ADB are listening to the points that you've raised. That's why we want to hear more, because we want to see how we could also mobilize the resources of ADB. As also you recognize, having a bank in this story, in this discussion, is something new. Frankly, as I think I was talking with Philip, I was thinking, maybe, this pooled procurement with the ability of ADB to support countries build up their manufacturing capacity is a nice virtuous cycle, right? So maybe pooled procurement has not happened in Asia because you talk pool, but you're talking about buying from everyone. But if you combine it with building regional manufacturing capacity, and then you have pooled procurement, then you sort of create another virtuous cycle of money moving from one part to the other. Of course, on the assumption that WHO will make sure that the manufacturers are of good capacity. And since we consider ourselves to be the favorite MDB of WHO right now. Yeah, so I think we are, I'm saying that. So I think there's really lots of things that we can do. So I think finally, the way we have named this, we call this Advance, because we're forward-looking, right? We want to make sure that this Advance, I think, as what everybody has been saying, what Jay is saying, we could not allow discussions whether single dose, multiple dose, or NRA struggling whether they would recognize a particular vaccines or not, or diagnostics being, how do the Global Fund is? I always love to say, there's a lot of pilot presentations. We in ADB, we always get that, people presenting to us pilot diagnostics and all that. I always wondered, why isn't it already rolled out? Why isn't it already out, right? So we look forward to a world where all of this would be, how do we call it, timely, rapidly be made available to everybody, because at the end of the day, our ADB, we have a nice vision statement. We envision an Asia that is resilient, inclusive, sustainable. And this is probably gonna surprise you, prosperous. Asia and the Pacific. So we started as a bank that wanted an Asia free of poverty. Now we're forward-looking. We want Asia, we believe in an Asia that's going to be inclusive, resilient, prosperous. And I think with advance, we could all achieve that. So thanks a lot, and have a nice afternoon.